Greetings, ladies and gents. You are listening to Truthiverse. I'm your host, Brendan D. Murphy, and we are on healthylife.net radio. This week I'm bringing Christopher James back to deconstruct the constructive fraud against us, the unlawful conversion, and if you listened to the last episode with him, then I'm sure you learned a lot. I just wanted to say, actually, the reason I brought Christopher on is because 12 years ago, I guess you could say I stumbled into this realm where I actually reached out to someone because I was in a very sticky situation, and I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't done anything unlawful, but I needed some help and understanding in the situation I was in with no money at the time. And I had this huge fine that had been issued to my person. And at the time, I didn't know what the difference was between a person and a man. So that was the beginning of my journey about 12 years ago. And so I had this crash course in getting educated in this space and the difference between legal and lawful and what a person is and this kind of stuff. So with my background, that's why I brought Christopher in, because I'm in the fortunate position of being able to recognize when someone knows what they're talking about and when they have the background and the understanding. And, you know, one of the things I like to do on the show is actually to find someone on one particular topic who knows more about it and has more detailed understanding than I do, so that they can come in and elaborate on that and tell you things that I might not be able to tell you. So in this instance, Christopher is definitely the man for the job. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with Christopher again, and we'll bring him in to talk about something he wanted to touch on in the previous episode with him, which was a little bit of his background in the system and helping people in their situation. So Christopher, when you're ready.
Pleasure to be here again, Brendan, and hello to everyone again in Australia. As I said, I'm a man that lives across the pond from you over in Canada, and my being here today and Brendan's efforts here today are all about one thing. We need to save our world, and we have the solution. We have the only solution right now, and this is what we're bringing forth. And the first part of this is the knowledge part of it, and that people are aware that this truth is coming forth en masse. And then once it gets in the hearts and minds and soul of our fellow man, that is when we're all collectively going to act together, and we're going to take care of this corruption very quickly, very powerfully, very integrally, and most importantly, very lawfully. And we're going to do it with love. I haven't known Brendan that long. He seems to be a great man. I know one thing, his heart is totally in this for this world, and that's why he does all that he's doing right now. And I guess a part that I didn't touch on the last time we were talking when we got into my background, because it's always important in law and truth, you always have to look at the foundation upon which anything is built. As I touched on, I did general contracting for 20 plus years, and like a home, if the foundation of the home isn't correct, eventually everything that you put on top of it is going to come crashing down. And this is where we're at right now in this world's history, where we're at with the consciousness of mankind. Mankind is realizing they've been lied to, and that lie has begun right from the very first moment, as Brendan and I have drilled down here in our last episode when we were first born. So it's very important that people know the man that they're talking about. After the issue happened with the pension case and my father, that's what really drilled me down to find out what the hell is going on. How do you hold these people accountable that might be a police officer, a judge? We never see any of these people held accountable. It's because the system that they're running is geared towards it. So I spent probably about 10 years helping people through the courts. As I started to learn, I just had to do that. And I got my nose bloodied many times, and I helped a lot of people. And a lot of people, it was 50-50, and sometimes the courts just ran over me. But near the end, in the last 2-3 years, I was able to stop court cases from even proceeding into a courthouse. I had cases that were moving forward ahead where people had, in traffic courts, $3,000 in fines because they were driving around with their own custom plates. They didn't drive with insurance, and they didn't hand them a license. They got the book thrown at them, so to speak, and all of a sudden they were supposed to be going into court, and all of a sudden it all disappeared. So I started realizing the power of what I was saying. And as I say to everybody, if I didn't say in the last show, is that all of us have been lied to, Brandon. All of us. So when I speak to any man or woman, especially if they're wearing the black robe, or if they're acting as a lawyer, or if they're acting as a police officer, all right, and if they are trespassing against me, I look at them, and as the good Bible says, they know not what they do, right? They are ignorant, as we all are ignorant. I was ignorant all my life up until about really 15 years ago, once the light started to come on. People in my neighborhood used to laugh at me. They used to call me the gopher, the groundhog. They used to ask me, is winter coming early this year, Chris? You always have the gopher come out and see if he sees his groundhog, if he sees his shadow. Well, it's because the neighborhood never saw me, because I was in here locked away doing all this enormous research, vetting everything, drilling down on everything to get to the bottom of it. I'm like a dog with a bone. So I just want people to know that that is also what this truth that's being presented before you here this evening is about. It's because it's also based on my experiences, as I said, what led to knowledge. It's not based on me just researching this stuff and have an understanding of it. It's actually applying the knowledge in real time. And right now in our world, we have a very real threat that's barreling down on everyone, and everyone's looking for the solution to stop all this. And I'm telling my fellow man and woman with all my heart, it doesn't exist on a piece of paper. Okay, there's no piece of paper in this world that can control you, and yet we are seeing all these pieces of paper that are forcing us and terrorizing us, being fear of, fines or shutting down our businesses or these lockdowns and that. All of this is all being done, like I said, based on a lie, and that's why this truth is so important, because it is the only thing that is going to take down all of this corruption right to the top. It goes right to the central bankers. So where we left off last week, Brendan, I think we were starting to get into, the remedy side of things, and people were starting to understand the difference between legal and lawful. It's very simple. Legal applies to incorporated, lawful applies to unincorporated. Every time you act in a capacity, you have duties and obligations. You have no rights. Only a man or woman has rights, as we talked about before. So see, these are very powerful nuggets when you understand it. Right? So how it works in this, what we started to get into here is that, as the teaser that I left off with, it's not a teaser, but it's a truth, is this journey that I went on that I guess I didn't allude to, I should have, is that I began to create this website, and it was my intention to bring this light forward through the court systems here in Canada, surrounding the courthouse with hundreds of thousands of people in Canada that were armed with this very knowledge that we're talking about here today. And that also included frontline, first-line responders, police, firemen, nurses, everybody, shoulder to shoulder, accessing our public courthouse. This is what I was working on to do. And then the coronavirus came along, and it changed my gears a bit. I kind of went off the radar about 5 months ago, and then I started to come back out again. And that happened because I met a man named Jesse Casanova. Didn't meet him, but I saw him do a video online, 17-minute video on the common law. Problem was, a lot of the stuff he was talking about was wrong. He didn't know that, but he did a great job. I saw a very talented man there, and I didn't know much about him. So again, this is the intervention of God, right? I've learned to let go and let God. I'm not a religious person. I'm a very spiritual person. I realize there's a creator. I realize that we're all connected in this world, and I realize the power of love, more importantly of knowledge. Once you combine those two to act against this evil, it's unstoppable. And the only thing that separates me from my fellow man is this knowledge that I've acquired. And the enemy in our world right now is ignorance. That's the biggest enemy. And it's only because the people have not been shown. So that's why these discussions are so important right now, because we're bringing forth this truth to everybody. So is there any place you would want to kind of jump in, Brendan, with where we're going with this? I want to make sure as we move this that the people understand.
Anything that kind of helps people grasp that the difference between, like acting in the capacity as versus being a man or woman. People have had some very interesting experiences in courtrooms when they have known the difference, as you would have had interesting experiences. I mean, anything that illustrates that in action, something that's happened to you, something that you've seen or even just heard that is credible, that helps people grasp, okay, well, you can walk into a courtroom as the fiction, as the person, or you can walk into a courtroom as a man. Some of that stuff is gold. It really helps people grasp it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I want people to understand something here is that we can't put the cart before the horse, okay? So all these communications that I'm having right now around the world, I've got 6 different countries that I'm working with, bringing these truths forward and working with people that have been on the forefront of common law, or at least aware and knowing that there's something really wrong that's in the justice system in our public courthouses, but they haven't quite been able to figure it out. A lot of people have been relying on the acts, the statutes. They've been going back, you hear the document Magna Carta. I say to everyone this, it's very simple. Unless your name appears on a piece of paper, and unless you have full cognizance of what that document represents, it has no standing. It doesn't bind you to anything. Okay, you have to remember that. Pieces of paper do not bind a man or woman to them. Like we come into this world paperless, right? There's no paper attached to us. And yet, as we get older, all this paper is being put to us, controlling us, ordering us, doing us all this around. And you have to simply understand how you step out of that, and then how you hold these people accountable. And the reason that our public courthouses has been corrupted is because we, the people, first and foremost, are ignorant, and we have not understood how to access our public courthouse correctly. Our public courthouses are empty, Brandon, worldwide right now. People are not accessing them in the capacity of a man or woman. As soon as you go in there, you're being given legal forms. And people don't know the difference, as we talked about earlier, between legal and lawful. Now that you understand that, the second thing you need to understand, when you go to that public courthouse, you never use their paperwork. Okay, ever. because the minute that you use those legal paperwork, it's called the rules of civil procedure. That's what the bar, that's what the lawyers all move under. This is all simple to understand. Are you bound to these rules of civil procedure? First, let's talk about the words are paramount. What does the word civil mean? It means Roman. Okay, so take that word out of there, the rules of Roman procedure, right? Roman law. That's what the statutes, codes, rules, regulations all around this world is all based on, right? All roads lead to Rome. So it's civil law. And those laws are created by members. Usually it's the man acting as attorney general for that country. They are responsible for ensuring that our public courthouses are accessible to everybody and that they are functioning properly so that every man and woman can seek the administration of justice. That's a right that we have. So you simply say, who is the man or woman at any public courthouse in this world that has the right to deny me access to it? Now, what did we talk about in the last show? The minute that you're acting in a capacity, like say as a court clerk or you're working in these courthouses as a bailiff or as a judge, you've got duties and obligations. They don't have rights. So go back to the question. Who is the man or woman in that public courthouse that has the right to deny me access to it? All of you should know the answer to that now. Nobody. No man or woman is going to come forward and claim they have the right to deny you access. That's the first killer truth that hurts this, corruption that's going on with this legal society. And then secondly, you say, well, who's the man or woman that can administrate property without right in this public courthouse? And they're going to say nobody. That's like me coming over to your house, Brendan, and I start, swinging your guitar around, or I take your car out for a ride, or maybe your girlfriend's there and I have, cuddle or something with her. At the end of the day, I'm doing things with your property without right. You understand that, right? And that's how powerful that is. Your flesh and blood is your property, okay? Nobody can administrate over me unless what? I've entered into a contract with another man or woman where there's been full disclosure that we understand what our duties are to each other. And if we go outside of those duties, well, then we're going to be held liable because of the contract. But if a contract doesn't exist, for example, do you have a contract with the service corporation, the government of your country that you're in, provincial, state, or even at municipal level, the local municipality? No, you don't have any contract with them. And yet they're taking all these enormous, liberties with our rights in that. They're running amok right now saying, well, we can pass these bylaws. You can't smoke. You can't bend over here. You can't put a mask on, whatever, right? These people have no jurisdiction. That means control, going back to the last show, to do what they're doing. So it's a very serious time right now because ultimately this truth that Brendan and I are talking about here tonight, this is the solution. It's the only solution to take down this massive fraud that's going on right now in the real time in this world. We have to first know who we are. Once you know who you are, then we're going to show you the truth surrounding the COVID lie. We've got all the evidence for it. And then once you see that, then everyone understands our solution is what? We gather. We, the people, have a right to gather, not protest. We're gathering around a public courthouse. Why? Because our creation, remember the hierarchy, our creator created man and woman, and then man and woman, ye are all gods, we're equal. We're born equal under the law, and we come into this world, and then we created government. And government was solely created to protect the property of man, period. And the minute that our creation gets out of whack, it's no different if you create something at your home, there, Brandon. That is your creation, and you have complete control and ownership of it. And the only way that you're going to get into trouble is if your property causes wrong and harm to another man or woman, trespasses against them. Otherwise, nobody can administrate your property without right. Right? It's like if you wrote a song, nobody can take your song and do what they want with it, collect money off it, tax you for it, do all these things. They can't. It's your creation. You have, that's what I mean, like the CRA in Canada, it's the Canadian Revenue Agency. You just simply have to write one single sentence to any man or woman that operates in these taxation industries, that's the head of the service corporation, and you simply say to them, you say, in our case, it's Bob. You say, greetings, Bob. I was going through my records here today, and I cannot seem to find the obligation means contract, upon which Bob or any agent or officer acting under his control for the CRA, ready for this, claims that a debt be due and true. Because they're always coming after some fee that you owe, that there's someone saying that there's a debt that's owed. Listen to what I said there. Who's the man or woman that's coming forward to claim that there's a debt be due and true? I've covered, is it the CRA? Is it you, Bob? Or is it any agents or officers under your control? Which one of those people is coming forward claiming that I have a debt that's due and true? Well, nobody does. Right? No one's going to come forward because there's no contract that exists, and all of this is being, again, carried out under the auspice of constructive fraud that's occurred from when we were born, right? They're using that legal fiction that they created to put on you saying, hey, that legal fiction, like a franchise, hey, you owe us monthly payments or yearly payments on your franchise profits. This is how we support, this is how our corporate structure has worked. Everybody understands that, right? All the McDonald's corporations have to abide by the rules, the law, really, of what the head corporation says. Well, that's how it works in our world right now. Because of the unlawful conversion, you are looked at as a franchise, as a corporation, because we don't write our name in all capital letters. I don't know about you, Brendan, but I wasn't taught that. And a long time ago, when you look into this, there's a great man there in Australia, Justinian Deception, if you look him up on YouTube. And this man is drilled down on what's known as the syntax. It's the writing, the styling of the words. And a long time ago, people knew that when they saw anything written in all capital letters, that wasn't a man or a woman, that was a corporation. These are big truths.
This is huge, and it's very germane because what we're witnessing now is this rollout of this humongous global fraud where we've got the so-called authorities trying to brainwash us into the idea that whatever rules and regulations or statutes they create right now, we must follow it, we must abide by it. We know they're pushing towards a mandatory vaccination program, mandatory COVAX, all this coronavirus garbage that's going to happen, this fascism that's going to be happening under the cover story of a pandemic, which doesn't exist. None of it applies to the living men and women. And that's what we need to get through to people, is that it's only these fictions, they can only legislate for the other fictions. And I want to actually come back to the lost at sea thing. And I don't know if you want to touch on, there was something from 1666 called the Sedeke V Act, which seems to play into this, feed into this. This is part of the history behind how we ended up in this weird space lost at sea. I think it was something like 7 years. If you don't reclaim your property after 7 years, you're declared dead effectively. So we're all kind of dead and lost at sea. I mean, do you want to go into that a little bit and pull it apart?
Sure, I love pulling that stuff apart. So it's nice to see, Brendan, you've gone down the rabbit hole and you've learned this knowledge, but this knowledge that you've learned is nothing more than corporate policy, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't mean jack diddly squat. Yeah. The Seska V Trust that you're talking about of 1666, when they brought that out, again, this is all the system to compromise the consciousness of man. Mm-hmm. Is your name on that document? Remember what I said to you earlier, if people are putting pieces of paper in front of you with words on it, unless your name's on it, unless you were there when it was written or you have full cognizance and you've agreed to it with your wet signature, that piece of paper doesn't mean a damn thing to you. Mm-hmm. Get it in your head. So that's how you tear that apart, because number one, you never want to be recognized other than a man or woman as one of the people. You are not a citizen. And that's why they give you citizen what? Ship. See, because the citizenship, the ship operates out on the sea. Exactly. So you go down these rabbit holes, you can learn about all this. It's like the river, for example. When you're born, like what keeps the river, the flow of the current going? Currency, the banks, right? And then when you're born, your birth, when you come into the doctor, right? He creates a manifest showing that's what's happening in the hospital, that a new product is being brought into their world, so to speak. And then they create paperwork that works all out in the sea. So that's why everyone needs to come back. And when you correct the record, that's why I have to say this in 2 minutes, is that we don't have time for everybody to be going and correcting the record because of this coronavirus fraud that's barreling down on us. We need to amass and understand only the trespass when we're born and this action that's coming at the public courthouses. That is what's going to turn everything around, Brandon. Once the people understand the simple truth, we've got the vehicle now to gather en masse, and then we are actually going to bring this solution forward simply for the world to see. It's going to be a beautiful day if we can get there and if they don't cause a war or pull the plug on the financial markets. But even if they do that, Brandon, I say to all the listeners at home, you got to stay focused. You got to stay focused on this truth, on this light that we're bringing forward right now, because that is our solution. They can stop me when I'm there with maybe 10 or 20 people at a courthouse. In the current system now, they're not going to be able to stop hundreds of thousands of people around a courthouse that are awake, that are aware, and armed with knowledge. And that's what we have to do right now. We have to arm ourselves with knowledge so that we can ride out and take down this evil that's been going on in this world, corrupting the consciousness of man. The most important takeaway that I want people to understand is that none of that stuff applies to us, a man or woman, right? Remember, it's words on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter if it happened yesterday or if it happened 2,000 years ago that they're pulling some document out of their arse saying, oh, well, this goes back to this date that created this. No, this was all fraud that was being created by people that wanted to control mankind for a very long time in this world. Actually, there's a beautiful video that I ask everybody to go and watch on my website. It's the Four Founders video. It's under the Knowledge tab. This is an absolute incredible journey and a very simple factual one. It's showing people how in the United States, where the common law came from, where law came from, the power, the rights and everything that man and woman had. These things were taught to children back then. They weren't taught all this other nonsense and indoctrination that's going on in our schools today. They were actually taught true law. They were taught the importance of respecting your fellow man and woman, right? And acting in love. And that also to stand up, that if someone is attacking you or trespassing upon you, that you have that right to hold that man or woman accountable. And I'll tell you, that documentary, it really touched me. And I've had so many people from around the world email us saying they cried when they watched it. And there's Americans that are writing me saying, we had no idea this monument actually even exists in our country. And the storyline behind it, all the representations and all the caricatures that's been sculpted and how it's been created as you work your way around this incredible truth that's there in a physical form that's telling you, and the people that actually, disseminate what is being said on this monument, the statue, what the symbols and all that mean. When you see it, it resonates with you. You go, oh my God, that's right. And that's why we've got so far away in this world from truth. Right? We need to get back to the truth. And it all began when we first came into this world. That's all what we have to look at, because you cannot know who you are until you understand who you are not. And once you understand who you're not and what was done to you when we were born at birth, I'll tell you, Brendan, that's the game changer for this world, because then we're able to take that foundational truth. And remember, I told you, like a foundation of a house, everything will fall down that's over above it. Well, in our case, all these incredible core foundational blocks, be it financial, be it political, be it medical, be it health, whatever we've got that are out there, these we know these are core foundations that we have existing within our world and our countries that keep the peace between everybody. Well, it's going to be very simple for all those great men and women that work in these roles now. Once they get this truth consciously, they are collectively within their internal. Remember, they're service corporations, so they better do it or they're going to be held liable by their fellow man. That's how it works, right? They can't come and do things against a fellow man. They're going to know now that what's ever being written internally by legislators, or they call it policy, codes, rules, statutes, or acts, like the Highway Traffic Act. You just go into court, you say, is that the Highway Traffic Act you're referring to here? Well, isn't that written by the Service Corporation? I would say Ontario here in Canada. The judge is going to say, absolutely. Well, I'm not an officer and agent of that corporation. Who's the man or woman that wrote that? Because my name doesn't appear in it. And obviously everyone's under some presumption that I'm bound by this Highway Traffic Act, right? And you can say, is that a legal proceeding we're under? Everyone knows the difference between legal and lawful now. So once you get these core foundational truths, it allows you to protect yourself properly and speak honorably in these courthouses. So, where we're at with this right now, as we've talked and we've go back before, we are here because we're under a threat from an enormous trespass that's occurred of us, not only at birth, but now we've got this trespass against the mind of man surrounding this COVID lie. People need to understand that my background was in the music and entertainment industry for, 20 years. What I was doing at that time back in the 80s, there was 86 companies, independent companies in the music industry. Today, there's only 5. Right? And these 5 are all controlled by this. It all goes up when you understand the central banks. They control and everything. So when they have these tentacles that they've had in place now for a very long time to get control of the print, the music, the radio stations, the motion picture industry, the television, they've got the world right where they want them, the people, because they can put forth this mass disinformation. They condition you by all the television shows with cop shows. When you see a judge standing up there, you've got a prosecutor that's really tough. It's a scary place to ever go, as these courts, but that man or woman wearing the robe, well, you're under their control and you got to do what they say or you're going to get locked up, etc. Well, here's the facts, people. That man works for a service corporation, right? He is your employee. He is your public servant, and people don't know that. And how he becomes your public servant is when you access it and you're able to be the actual man or woman standing in front of them. That's what turns them around. That's what puts them in their place, because they know that their creator is before them, not the created. That birth certificate. Right? And unfortunately, if this was a couple of years ago, Brandon, I already know what you and I would be doing. We'd be having these weekly seminars, and we would start to break down to help people to write the correct paperwork once they understand who they are, and going into these courthouses and correcting all this wrong and harm against the society we do not belong to, called the bar. The bottom line is we're here tonight is because we don't have time for that. We don't have time for people correcting their own ID. We have an enormous threat that's barreling down on us. It's this financial tsunami right now that they've created. Right? All based on fraud. Everything that they're doing is based on fraud. Every single thing that's coming out of these people's mouths from the service corporation, whatever they're telling us or ordering us to do, it's the exact opposite of what should be being done. And we have the evidence now showing that. So this is going to get really ugly. I'm not here under some kumbaya moment. I'm not ignorant to truly understanding what's going on. Remember, I got 20 years of enormous research. I've got over 55,000 files I've kept in my vault that I call of knowledge, okay? And that is what my truth and that is based on. And I may not know everything. I'm not trying to be here saying I'm this Mr. All-Know-It, but I'll tell everyone right here, right now, I'll give notice to the world. I know damn well what's going on as far as what trespass occurred to us when we were born, and I also have the truth surrounding COVID, and I also have the solution moving forward. I have the trifecta, all three things, and that's why I'm here this evening. We're here to bring this truth simply. Before you can understand the solution, you have to understand what happened to you when you were born.
Well, that's right. Diagnosing the problem is the first step to employing a solution. It's like, Alcoholics Anonymous. First, you got to admit that you've got a problem. So that's what we're saying here. We're going into the problem. We're diagnosing the problem. This is obviously something you've spent many years doing. I'm definitely no stranger to it myself. I've been on my weird little journey for 17 years now. I mean, there's just a great synergy here. And you're right. The time is now, and we have to have a sense of urgency, because if you're aware of what's going on, it's obvious that the powers that want to be have a very high sense of urgency, and they're really trying to roll out this fascist garbage as quickly as they can. And the propaganda machine is in massive overdrive. They are lying to us about absolutely everything. I've been astonished, actually, at the number of people who are supposed to be awake who have completely bought into the pandemic and think it's real.
There's so much information that I could be throwing at you right now, but at the end of the day, it's all irrelevant. Remember, paperwork that's been created outside of your knowledge, it doesn't apply to you. So don't try and learn it. Don't try and understand it. The hospital record is just that. It's a record. Doesn't bind you to anything. So we were talking earlier, Brendan made a great point that in their system is that if you don't come back after 7 years and give them notice that you've returned, basically on the land, because remember, as soon as you're born, what did I show everyone on the first show that we did? When you register something, it's dragged out to what? The jurisdiction of the sea. So all of us are operating out on the sea right now, like in these vessels and these rubber dinghies in their fictional world that they're doing, and no one's been recorded. You don't register. I didn't talk about that word. You never register anything. Why? Because when you register something, you're turning over jurisdiction, and we talked about the word jurisdiction. It means control to somebody else. You want to place it on the record. Okay, and that's why in how it's supposed to work is that when we were born, there should have been a record when we were born on the land, but they don't allow that in this system that's been created a long time ago in order to keep and control everybody ignorantly. And in their system, they say if you don't come back after 7 years, like no one tells your mother and father that. You're a baby, you don't know this stuff, you're barely speaking at 7 years of age. Well, if they figure you haven't come back after 7 years and address this fraud that they've created, this constructive fraud in the hospital, well, then you're just lost at sea, and they carry on. But what people don't realize, like for example, in the United States, the minute that a man or woman is born, is that corporation that's created in their name, it allows the state or the other service corporation in the United States, the larger corporation, to borrow $1 million against that entity right off the base. Okay, that's how they set it up in their system. What they also do, this is why they say war is profitable. They put life insurance on every single entity that they create. Right? It's sick what's going on. These are huge things you can learn from Anna von Reitz. She's got over 3,000 PDFs. All that information and knowledge is all there. But at the end of the day, we don't want people to be going down these rabbit holes looking at all this, because we've got a train barreling down on us right now of enormous wrong and harm, and this financial tsunami that's about to hit us all. That's the thing that's going to take everybody down if we don't get restoration of our courts. Why? Why is that so important? Remember I told you we're going to restore public courthouses. We're going to correct the names on the record of how we've all been, unlawfully converted into these persons. All our property, all our things that are on title, all that stuff's going to get created, and the world's going to be a wonderful place. But also what's going to get restored at that same time, Brendan, at least in Canada, is our Bank of Canada. For people that don't know, we were the only country in the world that truly had a public bank that operated from 1934 to 74. And then Justin Trudeau, the man who's acting as Prime Minister today for the service corporation called Canada, it was his father, Elliott Trudeau, that committed the highest level of treason against the people of this country. He gave our patents, which are what? Our property, the people's property, that allows the people to create money, which we were doing from 1934 to 74, interest-free. Imagine that, that we have a bank that's actually lending money to the provinces, the municipalities, the federal, provincial level. It paid for all our roadways, our hospitals, our schools. It was incredible. And our debt stayed at $18 billion. It never moved. And they say, well, why did that happen, Chris? Because every dollar back then that was created through taxation, even though it was illegal or unlawful, legally it was fine, lawfully it wasn't, that money was at least being spent back into development projects, into perpetuity. So that debt could never rise. And why would that debt never rise? Because there's no interest attached to the loan, right? It's like if you and I were the creators of money, Brendan, and say you had 4 children and I had 4 children, I'm just using arbitrary numbers here, and both you and I had the right to create money for our families, interest-free, and give it to them. And then I came to you, Brandon, and I said, hey, Brandon, guess what? I'll tell you what. I do it by 2 ways, hook or crook. I'd say, listen, I'm going to give you all this money if you tell your family members that basically they have to borrow money from me and then they got to pay interest on it. Oh, it'll be a small interest amount, and I trick you into doing that, or worse yet, I threaten you. You know, I say, you either do this or I'm going to kill you. That's how the system was ultimately set up around us, right, with the central banks. So if you would do that to your children, that would be a horrific thing. If you allowed me to create money out of thin air, which you had the right to do automatically for your children, and yet you're allowing me to lend it to them with interest. And now I'm enslaving them to this interest, because people need to understand in the monetary world, when money's created, it's a whole area you can learn about too, very simply. Every time a dollar is created in this world, there's interest that comes along with that money. In order to pay back the interest, more money's got to be created. Well, every time more money's created, it's called fractional reserve. There's more interest that's put on it. It's a rigged game. When you understand that if $1 comes into the system and there's 50 cents, say, attached to an interest, and that's all that ever exists, how are you ever to pay back the $1.50? You can't, because the 50 cents was never created. It was only shown on paper as interest. Only the dollar was created. And that's ultimately what's happening on a grand scheme today. And these central bankers have used, through the birth certificates, through their control of the monetary system, getting control of the banking system, you know, it goes back a long time. This is how they've enslaved the world. This is how they control the world. This is why, you know, a top World Bank lawyer, Karen Hudas, who works for the World Bank of 20 years, she's on my site in a short clip in one of those foundational videos, and she tells everybody, you're hearing it right from the horse's mouth, right? What's going on? She thought this was all bunk too to begin with. Now she knows it's the truth. And that's why it's so important what we're doing here. So I would just leave this section off if I can quickly. There's a song online called The Holder in Due Course. And that's what reverts back to that 7 years thing, is that when the man or woman comes back and he's actually on the land, he's actually going around saying, hey, I'm the holder in due course. I'm the man whose name, whose property you took from birth. And what does that mean in simplistic terms? Is that everything that they've collected through that deceit, through that fraud, through taking your name and identity and using it to profit from, all of that money comes back to you. All of that money that was taken from you in taxation, not only you and your state, but your mother and your father and your grandparents, because they've all had this same system imploded on them. And that's when you start to take a step back and look at the big picture. All of this money that's been taken from these central bankers that have been controlling this world for a long time, the Pope, the Queen, and all them, all of that, we're talking trillions of dollars, is going to come back into every country. Now, what do you think that's going to do for our countries when that happens, Brandon? It would be, and this isn't some pipe dream. This is what happens if you and I went into court and you took $1 million from me, and I drag you into court and say, and I prove that Brandon took $1 million from me. The first thing they're going to do, they're going to make me whole. And then if they find out that Brendan terrorized me for 30 years, well, then the punitive side comes down on top. Now take it to the global level. What do you think the punitive side? First, all our countries around the world are going to be made whole. They're all going to have these trillions of dollars that were stolen through taxation brought back into the coffers. Then what happens after that? Then there's the punitive. Then the people are going to be rewarded. So that's when you understand the magnitude of, and money today is created on a screen, right? There's nothing that's backing it, gold or silver. So we can create and play that game as well. And that's why you have to have control of your bank in your own country. Our Bank of Canada will be restored back to we the people. And I believe that's also going to be a light to the world for Australia, everyone else, to realize we need to create our own bank that creates money by and for the people, interest-free for our big development projects. And where it all merges together with the world is with tariffs. Right? When a dollar might be a little bit more valuable in a different country, it all gets sorted out with tariffs that get placed on international trade. That's how it's supposed to work.
There you go. Beautiful. Ladies and gents, we're talking about, well, many things that tie into this fraud, this illusion that we are conditioned into from birth, and or transitioned into, in a sense. Christopher, we were talking about just off air, JFK's speech of 1963, what got him killed, the executive order, and his attempt to put the printing of the money back in the right hands and take it out of the hands of the bankers, which is what earned him the magic bullet. So let's go there.
Yeah. As I said, this is how beautiful it is. Once you understand truth, you're able to connect the dots very powerfully, okay? And believe me, I've had to climb through the mud to get all this truth, but I'm bringing it forth to people very simple for you to understand. You see, the same people that trespassed against us, Brendan, when we were born, okay, that same system, is the same people that are behind the COVID lie today. You have to understand. They've always been controlling and manipulating and moving this world. So I say to people, why was JFK assassinated? All you have to look up is executive order. There's 4 1s and a 0, okay? When you read that, it shows you that what John F. Kennedy did is in 1913, the Federal Reserve, again, these central bankers got control of creating the money and issuing it to the American people at interest, right? Again, they created this stuff all out of thin air, and this is what ran up the debt as Thomas Jefferson, as Andrew Jackson, these past presidents of the United States. And as Thomas Jefferson said on his deathbed, he said, I killed the bankers, and he did. He actually got them out of the country for a short time, but they all knew, as Benjamin Franklin said, as soon as they wrote the Bill of Independence, and you might know the adage, quote that came out of there, a child or a teenager or something came running up to Benjamin and said to him, what did we do? What did we do? And he says, well, we created a republic. And he says, providing that you can keep it. Right? And they lost it only a few years later. People didn't know through this deceit. They couldn't be beat. The American people could not be beaten physically in a war, right? And this is the Rothschilds, the central banking industry, because that's how the United States was created. Everybody from around the world was coming to the United States to live there. Why? Because of all this tyranny back in the day that was happening in Europe. That's why you got Italy, and all these people fled, and they landed on these shores, and then they became this incredible country that really was supposed to be a light into this world, that represented, when you see the four founders statute and story behind that, it's breathtaking. So JFK, that's why he was assassinated, because you do not take the creation of money away from the money makers, right? The saying as well, it's in the Bible, it's in many maxims of law, that you cannot serve 2 masters. Okay, so either we serve our master, who is our creator that comes into this world, which means how we serve him is that we love one another, right? And is that we understand what freedom truly is. I was watching the other night again. I just love the movie Mel Gibson and Braveheart, because it is such a huge movie, and nothing has changed since then. Longshanks still exists in this world, and it's still in London, right? These people are still there, yet they're doing a different mythology that's consciously not out there showing people being, gutted and their heads, their arms, and everything cut off. They're doing it through other means. They're now doing it through this COVID thing, through terrorizing people, through the whole financial system, the court system, which is nothing more than a monetary system. How they can get you in and out of that public courthouse and take as much money from you, from their lawyers, so that they all get paid and everybody's happy. It's not about justice. It's really just us. So that 1963 speech is very important, because JFK tells you about the military power, political power, financial power. They have everything, and these secret societies exist, and he's telling everybody he's going to do everything in his power to stop them from engineering. And what he was talking about is actually what's happening right now. This is the final coup d'etat that the central bankers are doing on the world. And they've had to use this lie of COVID in order to break down all the businesses, to cause order out of chaos. Go and look at the United States dollar bill. Look at the triangle on the back of it. Look what it says written around it. In Latin, it says order out of chaos. And that's what's happening right now in this world. Through the chaos, through fear, they're able to manipulate and guide people to the solution that they wish to bring forward, to look like the saviors to the world, when in actual fact, they're leading everybody to the slaughter. Right, financially, from a medical perspective. So that's why this is so serious right now. That's why we need to have these truths brought out into the light. And that's why the trespass that happens against all of us, Brendan, is so powerful, because it goes right back to what JFK was trying to do. Everybody else in this world has tried to step forward and correct this wrong or harm. People don't know that in the United States, it's still on the Supreme Court, it's still on the filings there in their Supreme Court, I believe. And it was from Louis T. McFadden. Look it up. And he put in a claim addressing what? The unlawful conversion of every man and of every American, when they brought it out in 1934. And we didn't talk about that. In the legal world, they file complaints. In the lawful world, we file claims. A claim trumps a complaint every single time, because it's a man or woman coming forward claiming that something is true. You're not there complaining, whining about something, and you have to use all these code rules and statutes and processes in their world in order to get to the truth and seek remedy. No, a claim is a man or woman coming forward. That's why when you see legal filings, you see the name of the parties, but there's a VS, there's a versus in it. There's no verses in the common law. I'm coming forward and I'm pointing across the room, say if Brandon's there, and I'm saying that man, I'm not saying that Brendan, I'm not saying that Mr. Douglas, I'm saying that man over there trespassed against me. This is what he did. He caused me wrong and harm against my property. And then you lay the evidence bare, right? And that's why there's no verses. People need to understand is that law does not follow process. This is what the bar is relying on. Process follows the law. And there's millions of laws in this world right now. So it matters that when you go into that public courthouse, the law that you're bringing in is the law that resides within your heart. It's the law that's unwritten. It's the common law of your common man. And they know the difference between right and wrong. They know that nobody can breach a contract, and they know that nobody can damage property or administrate it without right. So people that just heard what I said there, go back, rewind that, and you listen to that over and over and over again. That short few seconds, because it's right there. That's the keys to the kingdom forever when you understand the power of that word property. And when you say to any of these people that are acting in these highest roles in your government, you say, am I property? They're going to say, of course you're not my property. That's right. And who under your control, Bob or Susie, or agent or officer within the service corporation, is going to come forward and claim that I'm property, and who can also administrate property without right? And they're going to say nobody. And it's over right there, people. Listen to what I just said. If they can't administrate property without right, that means that not a damn thing that comes out of their mouth, not a damn thing that they put pen to paper applies to you or I. That's like me showing up at Brendan's house and I've written some fancy ticket saying, hey, guess what, buddy? I saw you, walking out of your house and you weren't carrying a leash or something. Well, my corporation claims that that's a charge and here's your fine and blah, blah, blah. Brendan would laugh at me and everybody would understand that's ridiculous. Well, it's the same thing that's going on with the police today. From traffic tickets to try and enforce these fines and masking, it's all done through intimidation. Why? Again, the police have all been lied to, but this is where they're starting to wake up. And we've got to fight back. And how you fight back and you destroy fear is with knowledge. And that's what I'm so grateful for you having here this evening, this platform, to be able to bring to people to share these simple truths with everyone.
Amen to that, brother. Well, I mean, we're right at the tail end of the show. I think that's a very impactful place to kind of wrap up. What's the take-home message here to wrap up episode 2 with you? Where's this going? What's the strategy? What can we expect from the system in terms of pushback? Where do you want to go with it?
It's real simple. We have a crisis in consciousness. My fellow man and woman, we've been lied to from birth. We do not understand who we are or the power that we hold. Why is this message that we're bringing forth to you here right now so important? Listen to what I'm about to say. Our world hangs in the balance moving forward. The next 6 months are crucial like you would not believe. This evil that has existed for a long time that implemented this system that we've been explaining, this unlawful conversion at birth, they are controlling everything and have for a very long time. That's why all these governments of the world are being controlled. And if we do not stop this corruption, this lie, this deceit, and that's why this trespass that occurs against us is the most powerful truth right now in the world, because it has affected every man and woman. And once we bring this out into the public and into the public courthouse to correct, it's going to expose this domino effect of all this so-called jurisdiction that these governments have had. They don't. And that's when we're going to seek remedy. That's where we're going to stop all this evil and corruption. It's going to be an incredible fight right now between now and the next 4 months. We need everybody to go to awarriorcalls.com and subscribe, and go to Earth United and subscribe. Why? Because then you're put into the database. If they take the internet down, we've got a back-end infrastructure where you're still going to receive the seamless communications and truths of our action to surround en masse in at least 6 countries, 5 or 6 countries, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the courthouses to bring this truth into the light, and we're going to correct it together, collectively, on a global scale. It's huge, this undertaking, and I can't do it alone, and I know Brendan can't do it alone, and that's why we need all of you to step up. You need to share these links far and wide. You need to get active and realize we are in serious trouble right now, but we do have the solution to take this corruption down.
Amen, brother. Well said and well summarized. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me yet again on this exposition where we're pulling it apart. We're showing people what's going on. Your knowledge here is obviously huge and invaluable, and your time and your energy. I'd just like to salute you for your ongoing efforts over years in doing this, in fighting the good fight. And obviously I'm with you on that. So ladies and gents, I can only encourage you to do as Chris suggests, subscribe to warriorcalls.com and also Earth United, get in the database there. And we will no doubt will continue this discussion in the near future as well, Christopher, if you're down for it.
Yes, I definitely am. And to all the Australian people, you're not alone. Okay, the world's coming to support you, all of us. We must bring this light out of the darkness into the light.
Amen, brother. Well said. Thank you. All right, ladies and gents, we're out of here. I'll see you on the next episode of Truthiverse. And thanks again, Christopher James.
Thank you.